Cheselli gets hit.
77 run over him.
Hard into the wall. The 41. He'll collect the rest of the field.
We hit really hard. That f***ing hurt. It's drunk. That's what happens here.
5 cars slide, crash, and collide off the end of the back straightaway.
We're in it again.
Cheselli tries to make it 3 wide, and another big wreck.
That was really smart, Chase.
And welcome to Monster Energy Cup Series practice from Kansas Speedway in Kansas City, Kansas. An overcast day. The weather definitely a topic of conversation for these teams. We want to welcome in the viewers on the NBC Sports app, as well as those of you watching on regional sports networks, NBC Sports Bay Area, Washington, and Boston. Take a look at the playoff leaderboard, and this is an elimination race for the Monster Energy Cup Series. Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, they're guaranteed not to be eliminated. They have wins in the first 2 races of this round. Drivers like Kyle Larson and Kevin Harvick have accumulated enough points. They're not in a tough situation as far as advancing into the round of 8. But you get below Denny Hamlin to maybe Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, I guess, with 9 points above the cut line. Jimmy Johnson, only 7 points. Kyle Busch, Matt Kenseth on the wrong side of the cut line. Only 8 drivers advance to the next round. 4 will be eliminated. Drivers waiting at the end of pit road to go out onto the track. The last activity that took place on the track last night was an ARCA race, and we saw this with a practice earlier yesterday where drivers didn't want to go immediately out onto the track because of a little bit of a different rubber compound that was put down on the track because of the ARCA cars.
Yeah, and Rick, the track just went green, and there's a few cars rolling, but the majority of cars are sitting on the end of pit road waiting.
One of those driving and rolling is the 88 of Dale Earnhardt Jr. Great finish from a week ago. Not the one he wanted. He wanted to be up front and win that final race at Talladega. And now just a handful of races remaining in his Cup Series career.
We saw last night in the ARCA race, and we had started to see it also in the Xfinity practice yesterday afternoon, that the track had started to widen out, the groove had gotten black. You can see how dark it is, all the way up by the wall. Cars were running there last night, so I expect today to see cars moving around. First few laps are probably right on the bottom, but then drivers will start searching, trying to find the middle and the top.
At what point in the race will we see that movement?
Well, it's supposed to rain tonight, and I think that'll force the groove back down for a little bit until it gets rubbered up. And in the spring race here, the drop of the green flag, people were all over the place. But I think with the rain tonight, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it won't take a whole lot of time. I'd say halfway through the first stage, you'll start seeing people poke their way up the top. Maybe not to the wall, but by midway in the race, they'll be running up by the wall.
Just under an hour of practice now for this first practice of the day. There will be a final practice for the Monster Energy Cup Series from 12:30 to 1:30 local time, so 1:30 to 2:30 Eastern. Dale Earnhardt Jr. working the bottom of the racetrack right now. Fastest way around the track. That's what we saw in qualifying. 5 cars have been out on the track already, and it's Paul Menard who's the fastest in this first practice session. Austin Dillon, Ty Dillon, Matt DiBenedetto, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. the top 5.
See 197 miles per hour. The other issue these teams have is the wind. There is a tremendous amount of wind. It's blowing directly down the back straightaway. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. has got a tailwind, making him actually go a little quicker than he wants to in turn 3. He needs to slow down a little bit more than he normally would. And then that wind's trying to push you out of the racetrack as you drive through the middle of 3 and 4. And the exact opposite now that Dale Jr. is on the front straightaway. Now, at this point, he's directly into the wind, and he's going to turn in. And now you see that flag blowing. Now all that air is pushing on the right side of his car, and it actually makes more grip. So the car is going to drive better in 1 and 2 today than it does in 3 and 4. But Rick, as luck would have it, there's supposed to be no wind tomorrow. And so immediately it'll be a different condition tomorrow with no wind.
Let's go to Kelly Stavis.
Rick, I'm down here in the garage where a couple drivers have kind of rolled up a little bit late, including Denny Hamlin, who's been very relaxed. Remember, in yesterday's practice before qualifying, this team really focused on their car in race trim for, I think, essentially the entire hour and a half practice. Crew Chief Mike Wheeler telling me that their focus is really just on having a good, solid race. They've got a 21-point gap over the cut line, so not in a must-win situation. They really want to make sure they got plenty of time in race trim so that they would be ready for tomorrow's race. But when I talked to Denny after qualifying, he qualified fifth, will start fourth after Ryan Blaney's time was disallowed. He was sort of okay with it, a little bit disappointed. I think that he wasn't better with the consequences of qualifying yesterday, also determining a pit selection next week at Martinsville. A lot of these guys were, really hopeful and expected to get good qualifying spots that will have, like I said, consequences for next week as well.
And you touched upon the fact that Ryan Blaney's time was disallowed from his qualifying session. Ryan had qualified third, but because of a post-qualifying inspection infraction, his time was disallowed. He'll start at the back of the field. He is last to pick pits, the 21 team. So they have dug themselves in a hole, which it looked as though the 21 team was sitting pretty good because they were going to start up toward the front. Now they'll have to fight and battle with drivers like Jimmy Johnson in the 48, who they're fighting for to get above that cut line.
Yeah, normally these races are long enough that doesn't matter, right? You can still get a good finish starting in the back. In many cases, we've seen drivers and teams win from the back. But with stage racing and needing points, that is a huge penalty. Now it's going to become much more difficult for Ryan Blaney to get those points because he's got to start in the back. And, where he is in points, he's only 9 points to the good.
Right.
He could immediately at the end of stage one be in a deficit and having to make that up. And Jimmy Johnson is one of those people that he is racing against. And this has not been a good year for Jimmy Johnson on the mile and a half. It's been his worst year on mile and a half since he came into the Cup Series. And can he turn it around? Well, he has an opportunity. Right now he has an advantage because one of the guys he's racing to get in that last spot now is starting in the back of the field. The 48 and Jimmy Johnson have to take advantage of that. They have to score points in that first stage.
It's amazing that we talk about Jimmy Johnson almost as an underdog. The 7-time champion was able to rise above the competition at Homestead, Miami at the end of last season to win his 7th championship, tie Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty with the most championships of all time in NASCAR. And yet, going into these playoffs, Jimmy Johnson has been a almost underdog as far as the championship.
I mentioned the 21 car, and they went through inspection, normal inspection after qualifying. They take the top 5 through inspection. They go through the laser, but there's a visual inspection. And so when this car went through the inspection, what NASCAR saw was in this area right here. So you can see where the rear window and the deck meet right here. That is the problem that NASCAR saw. So that is supposed to meet that edge right there that I'm covering up. You're not supposed to be able to see that. the deck lid and the rear windows should touch each other. It should be a flush-looking transition, and it just plain and simple wasn't. And so NASCAR said, hey, that potentially is an aerodynamic advantage. The parts and pieces are not supposed to move, so they disallowed the time.
So that is why Ryan Blaney went from qualifying third to now starting at the back of the pack. And NASCAR has let us know there won't be a points penalty. So wherever he finishes through stage 1, 2, and the final stage, he will earn those points. And wherever he falls in relation to the 12 drivers that are trying to make it into the round of 8, that will be the determination.
And some people at home may be saying, well, why does NASCAR care? You know, it's maybe a quarter of a half an inch. Because if you don't hold everybody to an extremely high standard, guess what happens? Everything gets out of hand. So NASCAR in order to make it fair for everybody, there has to be rules, and the rules have to be enforced.
First practice underway from Saturday here at Kansas Speedway. It's Monster Energy Cup Series practice from Kansas Speedway. Just a few minutes into this first session of the day. You can catch all the action of NASCAR on NBC with the NBC Sports app. You get closer with alternate camera angles, driver stats, and track information. Get it anytime and anywhere. Let's go back into the garage. Kelly.
And Rick, I wanted to talk about an interesting conversation I had with a couple of our young drivers yesterday about the wind, starting with Chase Elliott when I talked to him before qualifying and asked him about the wind. He said he wasn't a big believer in it, that he didn't think it would affect anything that he did out on track. So then later, when I was having an off-camera conversation with Kyle Larson, another one of our young drivers, I asked the same thing. I said, do you actually feel the wind out there? Because some drivers really seem to talk about it a lot, but Chase says he doesn't notice it. And Kyle says, no, man, I don't feel anything. It's just those old guys, all those old drivers. They overthink things too much. So, Burton, what's your take on it? Is there an actual effect when we get these big gusts of winds for you guys out on track?
Wow. I don't know if I should take it the way I think you just threw it, but did you call Burton an old guy?
No.
I'm sorry, I was napping while you were talking.
See, I didn't. I was very careful just to ask for his neutral opinion.
Kelly.
No? Nothing?
Not yet. You throw to me and say, old guy? I mean, come on. That's not a neutral opinion. So this is what I'm going to tell you. I, for years, laughed at the idea of when it mattered. I'm like, it does not matter until this car. And to me, these boxier cars, bigger roofs, bigger sides, quarter panels really close to the ground, it does matter. It makes a complete difference. I can promise you that the cars drive better in 1 and 2 right now than they do in 3 and 4 based on the way the wind's blowing. And there's just no doubt about it. Now, you don't feel the car moving around. It's just that the car will make more grip on one end of the racetrack than the other.
Well, I know that he learned this move from a week ago from an old guy, because this right here was a classic move into the race and tried to get up front there going through the middle. Suarez came down looking to block, but the 24 was already there.
You can see right there, he saw the hole closing up and tried to get on the brakes and get out, but that's Talladega. That's a Talladega wreck. The whole, when that opportunity presents itself that late in the race, if you're not willing to go into that hole and poke the car in there, then you're not going to win those races. That's what you have to do to win them. Look how aggressive Keselowski was, but he did have a chance to have a great day there, pad his points, but going for the win. Right. Keselowski's on to the next round because he drove aggressively and got the win, and you can see the playoff finishes, second 11th, second 16th. But what I like about him is that he's been in position to win races in the playoffs. They've brought their best game. Chase Elliott, a young race car driver, this moment has not been too big for him. He's risen to the moment. The team has risen to the moment. And they've shown that if they don't have bad luck, if they just go off of how you're running, they have the ability to advance into the next round. And I've been exceptionally impressed with this team. They've been their best when it matters the most.
Just 21 years old is Chase Elliott. 25 from Elk Grove, California is Kyle Larson, another one of the young drivers really exerting themselves, especially this year in 2017. Kyle Larson looking very impressive as he will more than likely advance to the round of 8 and continue on his quest for a championship.
Yeah, I love this Kansas key. Just, stay off the radar. And he did a lot of that last week. We didn't hear much of him until the race started to wind down. But the key is advance. He's in great shape, third in playoff points, 29 points ahead. And if he just has an okay day, he doesn't have to be great. You want to be great, but you don't have to be. And just do what you have to do to move on.
Kelly.
And he is another driver disappointed after qualifying. Remember, he was fastest in practice yesterday by a long shot when Kyle was getting ready to make his first run out here in practice this morning. He got a little info from his team. Listen in.
Everybody for the first 2 laps right here has been on the bottom both ends. And then after 2 laps, there's been a handful of good guys that have been left sides on the first set of hash marks both ends.
All right, so now you see the 42. He's made his first run, headed here back to the garage, and no doubt to get some adjustments and head back out.
Kyle Larson making his way back into the garage. Kevin Harvick is the fastest in this first practice of the day, running a lap 29.738. Making laps here at Kansas in this first practice session. He will be carrying one of the cameras that actually is right on his helmet. That is the helmet cam. His last lap, as you can see on his dash, 30.71.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a cause for concern right now. He's 33rd fastest. He's only run 3 laps, but 33rd fastest, I have a feeling that maybe they're out there working on some fuel mileage information, or the car is not driving very well. But if he that far off, move up to 19th on that lap.
A little bit of a pickup. His teammates, Kenseth is behind him at 26th right now.
And those blue dots, that's miles, that's RPMs. You see as he lifts off the throttle, they go down. He's going to accelerate. Burns a blue dot. Now we'll get ready to burn another one. Then it's going to light up another one.
And each driver and each team can kind of choose the information and how they want it displayed on there. Denny obviously goes with dots for his tachometer.
Yeah, he shut it off right here. He's going to come in. So as we ride along with him, you'll see the RPMs drop even more. When he comes on the pit road, you'll see there's no dots whatsoever because he doesn't need that information. It doesn't help him. But as they get low enough and pit road speed starts to become an issue, then he'll get a different signal to help him get on pit road. There you go. There's all red, now green, yellow, and all the
re-entry at least 1/4 on throttle at least.
So free on entry. You're going to hear that a lot, Rick. These corners are relatively flat on the entrance. The banking starts a little bit late. These cars have really small spoilers on them, and free on entry into Kansas is not unusual.
As he's pulling into the garage, we've seen quite a few flags. The wind, definitely a story here as far as what the weather has been doing. And right now, current conditions, it's 66 degrees, a little cooler than it has been even yesterday. Humidity at 75%. We put on their winds a lot. Well, that's because yesterday, Jeff, you questioned what was put up on the screen. Actually,
I don't think question was right.
Actually, you just said it was wrong. We had a real fun time with that too. The person who builds the graphics put on their 15 miles per hour, and Jeff yesterday said, well, that's wrong. And so our graphic person took it a little personally. So JP's okay now, we believe. He put on there a lot because that's what you had said earlier. What's the wind today? Well, it's a lot. Actually, it's gusting up to 30 miles per hour. So it varies a lot. But there's a front coming through right now, and so the wind's heavy on the minds of the crew chiefs and the drivers because, as you mentioned, it affects them differently at different ends of the track.
It really does. And I think also, if you look, it's so overcast today. It's very overcast. It's very chilly. And it's just going to be different tomorrow. The track's going to be slicker. It's not going to have as much grip. And that's difficult for the teams to deal with. So right now, cool conditions. You're going to have much more grip than you're going to have tomorrow. It's easy to get fooled. It's easy to think that you're better than you really are.
Straight into the wind there for Kenseth in one.
And Matt Kenseth started this practice off, and he was
about 26. Now
yep.
he's jumped up in the top 10.
He's definitely made a change. Or what we're seeing is that the second time out on tires actually may be a little bit better. And Matt Kenseth, to me, I know he's not right now, doesn't look very good as far as where he is in points. He's 8 points behind. He's got Kyle Busch in front of him that he's got to go through. For him to get in, he's going to have to go through Kyle Busch, potentially Jimmy Johnson, Ryan Blaney, but I really believe they can. I think they've had the speed to do it, and Matt Kenseth's experience, this moment is certainly not too big for him. He's been there, done that, and talking to Matt Kenseth, he's very calm. This is a guy that doesn't even know if he's going to have a ride next year. Former champion, race winner, just an unbelievable talent. People respect him in the garage, and he's mad that he doesn't have a ride, but you wouldn't know it by talking to him. And I just think that he views this as, you know what, I'm capable, put me in a position, and I'll prove it, and I think he'll find a way to make it happen tomorrow.
He was even lighthearted. We talked with him yesterday before the first practice of the day, and he was very lighthearted. We talked about the fact that he didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and he made a joke of it. I said, do you need to change anything strategically to do better and help yourself advance on? And he said, yeah, I'm going to change my strategy. I've been losing. I'm going to change it to where I'm winning. So, that's just the kind of the lightheartedness of Matt Kenseth as he comes off the track now. And the 4 of Kevin Harvick, who was the fastest until Kyle Larson just went out and posted a little faster lap. But Kevin Harvick, a week ago, last year at Kansas, see that move he put on, able to get the win, and that's what he's looking to do again. Doesn't need to get the win to advance to the round of 8, but it would definitely help him, put him in a position to where he could advance to the championship 4.
Well, one of the things that we do, we've been looking at Kevin Harvick because he was fastest until Kyle Larson went out and just topped the speed, but we were paying attention to this line graph. Practice is early, but what we see so far, you see Kevin Harvick is red, Kyle Larson's blue, Jimmy Johnson's blue, Kyle Larson is green, and as we go down the line here, that's the number of laps that they've run. The further this way, the more laps. This is speed. Up is bad, up is slow. So if you look at the bottom line, Kevin Harvick's graph, he looks, quite a little bit quicker than Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson comes back over here and runs that really fast lap. But if you look at the line graph all the way through here of Kyle Larson versus Kevin Harvick looks better. But more importantly, what I've been looking at is right here, Jimmy Johnson. Ignore that. That's something that happened, had to pass a car or something. But this part of the line graph, from there to there, is a big difference, Rick. Jimmy Johnson, in the situation that they're in, they're behind. They're in pretty good shape in points, but with the speed they have right now, they're going to have to find a way to find some speed because you've got Kyle Busch coming from behind, you got Matt Kenseth coming from behind, you got Ryan Blaney ahead of you in points, and it's 48 car who's we've talked about not had the mile-and-a-half season they need. They did not unload this morning with their speed they're going to have in tomorrow's race.
So Kevin Harvick qualified second, starts up front. That helps him as far as getting points in the first stage. Jimmy Johnson, on the other hand, qualified outside of the top 10. So he's got a little bit of work to do to get into the top 10 to get some points. He would like to get the maximum number of points he can from each stage to help him, give him a little cushion for that last stage when he's running for a finish and potentially can lock up that spot in the round of 8.
And those stages matter. They're huge. So essentially the only thing that matters when that green flag drops is where you finish in stage 1. And one of the things you have to do, we just saw Kevin Harvick working on getting on pit road. This is a little bit of a difficult pit road. It's hard to see the commitment cone. So here's Kevin Harvick in practice trying to max out his speed, getting there, and he just couldn't make it. And so now he knows what he does. He picks out a point on the wall. One of the signs on the outside wall, you pick up a point, you drive to that. He's gone too far. Now he says, okay, next time I got to lift a little bit earlier. What's my reference? I was using one sign. That was too far. Find another one, lift for that far.
Kelly.
Yeah, and just quickly, the only thing I heard Kevin say was that the car just doesn't have as much stopping power as it usually does, so that would explain in missing pit road.
Yeah, that's something that teams can work on a little bit. You can change brake pads maybe. There's several factors that go into braking, but that's something that matters because of green flag pit stops. We saw a few weeks ago Kevin Harvick gave up a lot of time getting on pit road at Charlotte. He had the lead, gave up a lot of time. The guy behind him was able to outbrake him. All that's not always just the driver. Sometimes it's the braking force within the car.
Trying to go from, as you see, the average 181 miles an hour to down to pit road speed. Very difficult here. See the 47 team and Kroger helping us out this weekend. We have the opportunity to try something new. We have taken Steve out of the booth and put him in his, well, natural habitat where a crew chief normally would be hanging out. And we want to thank Kroger for the opportunity to do that because it's their pit box that we're using for today's Xfinity Series race on NBC. Steve will actually be on pit road in pit box number 22 on top of the pit box. And Steve, how's it feel out there in the wind?
It's like back home again on pit road. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great perspective to be down here on this pit box during the Xfinity race. We're going to look at it from a crew chief's point of view. I've tried to do that from the booth, but I think Jeff and Rick got sick of me being next to them, so they put me down here on pit road, and it feels comfortable. It's a great perspective. Finally, the cars are coming from my right like they have supposed to be. They've did that for about a decade. But it's going to be great. We're going to break down strategies, what we see, and really still call the race with you guys up there just from down here on pit road.
Do you have your engineer sitting next to you?
I do have my engineer. I brought Jimmy, the brains behind the operation, and he's going to help me. When you talk about strategy, Rick, you know, I had to have engineers because it is very complicated. One person can't do it. So Jimmy and I are going to break down what we think the leaders are doing, what opportunities they might have as the stages progress. Remember, this is the first race of the final round for those Xfinity teams. This could perhaps punch their ticket to Miami, so there's going to be a lot to talk about later in today's race from the pit box.
So, Steve, I got a question for you.
Oh, no.
We had some comments from some young drivers saying that only the old drivers can feel the wind. What's your experience with the wind and how it affects the cars?
I think the most important thing, Jeff, is it gusty or is it sustained? Here today it looks pretty sustained. So then it's about what direction it is, so you know how it's affecting the handling of the race car, because it is changing it. And from what I understand, there's a front moving through tonight. It's going to be about 180 degrees difference tomorrow. So that's where I think a veteran driver will be able to say, hey, I've experienced that wind before. This problem we're fighting, it's totally wind-driven. It will go away versus no, this is a handling characteristic we better work on. But maybe that's why I only have seconds here. I never won this race because the wind and I never seem to get along.
Well, I appreciate your phrasing as compared to the other one I heard a little bit ago, veteran versus old. You made it sound much better.
Yeah, no, I would, as I get closer to the experienced level, I would never call that old.
Wonder what Kelly's doing right now.
Well, she's young, so she can say whatever she wants. We see the 78 of Martin Truex Jr. started off this round with a win, and it wasn't a conventional win for him, but on mile-and-a-half tracks, Martin Truex Jr. has been dominant against the entire field. Has 5 wins already in 2017. The next best by 3 different drivers, only 1 win on mile-and-a-half tracks. How about laps led? 856 laps led already this year. Kevin Harvick's the next best with 632. His average finish, 3rd. Kyle Larson's average finish, he was the next best, 7.8. 4 positions better. And then going for a record. He's already won 3 straights. If he gets 4 straight, if he's able to win here, he will be the only driver who has ever won 4 straight mile-and-a-half tracks.
Well, the weekend started out very good for this team. They sat on the pole yesterday, and of course, you know, that gives them a great opportunity to get another stage win. They keep padding their lead by getting stage wins, but also because they sat on the pole yesterday, that actually determines pitting positions next week, because next week's race at Martinsville is a 2-day show. So you go ahead and base, qualifying yesterday determines where you pick on Martinsville. So they're going to get perhaps the most coveted spot in all of pit road, that number 1 box at Martinsville. Everybody wants it, and they earned it yesterday. And that is the beginning of the round of 8. That's the beginning of it. So already they got a head start on the round of 8.
Kyle Busch will be fighting to get into the round of 8 tomorrow.
How about these two cars running together? We don't see a lot of this. When we cover these practices, the drivers go out and they kind of run by themselves. But Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch, they're 8th and 9th, respectively, on the timing chart, and they're running right here together. See Kyle Busch with a wiggle, and it's a good opportunity for Matt Kenseth to understand where he needs to be a little better, how his car drives behind other cars. Two completely different ways of driving. You see Kyle Busch using the middle of the racetrack. Matt Kenseth just stuck on the bottom.
At the start of the round of 12, everyone would have thought that the 18 would be a lock to be able to make it into the round of 8, but it didn't start well for Kyle Busch. He was running second in Charlotte when he self-proclaimed he went a little bit too hard, lost it, got into the wall. A lot of damage to the back of that car. They continued to work on it over and over and over, and at the end of the race, Kyle was exhausted. Had to have a little medical attention there, and then off to Talladega. So in a hole already, and when he went to Talladega, you can never predict what's going to happen. Looks like he missed his brother, but the 48 shot up the racetrack, and the 18 made heavy contact, and then Kyle Busch was out of that race. So a 29th and a 27th place finish, the first 2 races of this round of 12. And that has put Kyle Busch in a little bit of a hole. Even though he had playoff points that put him in a good starting position, those 2 poor finishes have now put him in a position where he's fighting to be in the round of 8.
Yeah, one of the guys he's racing to get in that was Matt Kenseth that we just showed behind, but you can see he's driven away from Matt Kenseth. They have pretty close to the same amount of laps on tires. I'd say right now Kyle Busch is just a little bit better than Matt. But more importantly, perhaps, is where is Kyle Busch compared to Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Blaney? Because he's going to have to jump over somebody. He's going to have to beat Jimmy Johnson. He's going to have to beat Ryan Blaney or have Chase Elliott or Hamlin or somebody have problems to get himself into the top 8.
There are a few drivers that are below him right now on the list. One of those is the 17, Kelly.
Yeah, that's Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who is 22 points below that cut line. He definitely needs some help, especially after qualifying yesterday. He didn't even advance out of the first round, so he qualified 25th, which was surprising to him, especially after they qualified 4th here at the spring race. Like many others, wind also a topic of conversation for this team.
Dang, this one sucks. We got to get this thing where it takes us set. How is it flying?
All right, so then they went on to say that they believe the winds will flip-flop for tomorrow. Now, their game plan for Ricky Stenhouse and the 17 team, they told him to run all over the place on the track. He has been in and out of the garage. His biggest concern has been loose end. He hasn't been super comfortable in that 17, but yesterday he told me he really felt like they knew the direction they needed to go with this car. They'll have one more practice after this to figure it all out.
Kelly, he just turned 30. Does that put him into the old guy status now as far as the win talk?
No comment. That's sort of borderline, maybe. I'm going to have to clarify with Kyle Larson is what I'm going to have to do.
Okay. All right.
You don't have to use every quote, Kelly.
Take a look at the top speeds in this practice. Larson and Harvick up top. NASCAR playoffs continue from Kansas. Xfinity Series today on NBC. That first race of the round of 8. Coverage begins at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, Monster Energy Cup Series, an elimination race in the round of 12. Coverage starts at 3 p.m. on NBCSN. Kevin Harvick, talked a lot about him and the laps that he's put down in his race setup. Right now, he's the second quickest here at Kansas, and only Kyle Larson has posted a faster lap average than Kevin Harvick. When you look at the 5-lap average and the 10-lap average, so the consistency over 5 laps and 10 laps, it's Kevin Harvick that tops the chart on both of those.
Run 20 laps. Second, first, and first. That's a good start to the day. And they've definitely brought some speed to the playoffs as well. We talked about Chase Elliott, and they've brought speed, but this 4-car, they've run better since the playoffs have started as well.
Harvick back in the garage to the attention of his crew. Under 10 minutes to go in this practice session. There will only be one more practice session that will be at the beginning of the afternoon as we see Jamie McMurray, and he has the deepest hole to dig out of.
He does. He you know, unless something just crazy happens, they're going to have to win this race. And I think you'll see Matt McCall as crew chief. I think you'll see him do whatever kind of strategy, even if it means it doesn't work out and they get a horrible finish. They're going to do whatever they can to try to, you know, get that win. Because, you know, if you think about it, you know, he could have a really good day, but he has to go through so many people to get himself into the top 8, and it's just going to be very difficult for that to happen.
So are the points out the window for, say, Matt McCall and Jamie McMurray as far as what they're thinking? Because 29 points, even if he wins both stages, that's 20 points. It still doesn't even get him to the cutoff line. So are they thinking solely about how do we win this race? Don't worry about stages, win the race.
So first of all, they're 5-lap average, they're 5th. On 10-lap average, they're 4th. So they have a good race car. They're not the best car, but they have a good race car. So I think the strategy for this team is to call the race however you have to call it to get track position at the end of the race. Be willing to give up stage points. The heck with stage points. Just do it. Whatever you got to do to get track position at the right time of the race so you can execute a win. I think that to rely on points, I would be willing to give them up. Now, if you're getting points because you're running well, you're getting stage points because of that, then of course you're not going to give them up. But it's all about track position late in the race for this team.
And again, right now, as you see on the left side of the screen, the playoff leaderboard, 29 points below the cut line for Jamie McMurray. So he has an uphill battle in front of him this weekend. And Sunday, if he wants to continue on into the round of 8, he's going to have to win here in Kansas.
You have to be true to who you've been all season and do what got you there.
He has once again shown his dominance.
We've already shown that we can win.
Keselowski's going to win at Talladega.
I think this could be the year for us.
Daniel Suarez working his way back into the garage, currently 3rd on the speed chart here at Kansas, and he has a Racing Roots episode that's coming up tomorrow at 8 o'clock on NBCSN. Here's a taste.
The pride of Monterrey, Mexico is free and clear.
This is Monterrey, right? I don't know what I expected, but it was not a thriving metropolitan area.
So this is really the only place in Monterey to race, right? Oh,
Here's
man,
Chip.
that thing's fast.
It's funny, you know magic when you see him. He's got to be flying when he gets ready.
This is the most authentic meal you've ever had in your life. Right now.
So this area is more like my area. My school is just from here.
Oh my.
This is part of the shop. This car was mine when I was maybe 16, 17 years old.
When I see that Daniel liked the cars and liked the race, I see in Daniel my life.
And again, that's tomorrow at 8 p.m. on NBCSN after the Monster Energy Cup Series race. And what an impressive season Daniel Suarez has already had. He is in a situation where was disappointed that he didn't make it into the playoffs. And now, I mean, here at Kansas, running against the best and currently 3rd on the chart, he's the fastest that isn't in the playoffs here.
Yeah, I appreciate Daniel Suarez being disappointed that he's not in the playoffs, but at the same time, a huge year for him coming in and competing for Rookie of the Year off of a championship in the Xfinity Series. And I'm really looking forward to watching that Sunday night. Kyle and Rutt do such a good job of bringing out people's personalities and going back and seeing how people grew up and the conditions. That's going to be so much fun. They do such a good job.
I want to give a few updates as to how some of these drivers are running right now. Chase Elliott is 12th in the 24 car, and Chase Elliott's been on the racetrack for 32 laps.
And I think they've had a solid practice session. You mentioned they're 12th. They don't really show up. They're 2nd on top 10 on 10 lap average speed. So pretty solid run. I think they have a good basis to build off of for the second practice.
Take a look at Kyle Busch in the 18. Kyle right now 8th as far as 1 lap average for speed. second quickest as far as the Toyotas go to his teammate Daniel Suarez, who's above him in third.
When I really look at the 18 and kind of analyze how their day has gone, I think they might have the best car. I know the 10-lap average, it shows them as third, but they had a little bit of a slower pace in the first time they went out, but since then, that 18 car, their second run and third run out, very, very impressive. So I think right now this 18 car is the best car.
So again, Kyle Busch below the cut line right now. Above the cut line by 21 points is the 11 of Denny Hamlin. We ride along on the helmet cam. But Hamlin started off this practice down in like 30th and then jumped up into the top 20. Now he's hovering right around that 20th position.
Yeah, and I'd say that they're about in the 8th to 12th place as far as 10-lap average, as far as where they have speed. They do not have the speed of the 18 car, of the 42 car, but I think they're similar to where, say, Kurt Busch, Austin Dillon, Chase Elliott, maybe a little bit slower than Chase Elliott, but they have a little bit of work to do.
Last week's winner, Brad Keselowski, and the 2. Keselowski right now 25th on the speed chart. Is that any cause for concern, knowing that he's going to be making it into the round of 8 because of the win at Talladega last week?
Well, it's cause for concern because there's more races coming. We know they're into the next round, but Charlotte did not go well for Brad Keselowski and his team. They're going to have to find some speed on these mile and a halves moving into the next round. You've got Texas, so they're going to have to perform, but with Martinsville and Phoenix, I think Brad's very good at those racetracks, and if they're going to go into a round where they've had weaknesses mile and a half, that last round might suit them the best.
Right behind the 2 and looking to the bottom of the racetrack is the 21 of Ryan Blaney, and definitely the biggest story of the day because qualifying yesterday, he qualified third, but when he went through post-qualifying inspection, NASCAR found something that didn't look right. They were penalized by taking away and disallowing the time that they had run. So no more third place starting position for the 21. Now they'll have to start in the back.
And they have good speed. They don't have great speed, but they have enough speed to get themselves up toward the top 10. The question is going to be, when do the cautions come out? And with that penalty, are they not going to get any stage points? Remember, he is 9 points to the good. Jimmy Johnson, 7 points. Kyle Busch, -7. Kenseth, -8. If all those other guys are getting stage points and you're not, then you enter round 2 already at a deficit. So how are they going to be able to overcome? And as a young driver, don't try too hard. Get what the car will give you and get what you can get.
Take a look at the top 12. These are the playoff contenders and where they ended up in this practice session on the far right. You see Kyle Larson. He's the only driver that's ever started at the back of the pack and got stage points here in 2017. First practice of the day for the Monster Energy Cup Series is complete. Kansas Speedway. And fastest for a lap average was Kyle Larson. Second fastest was Kevin Harvick. But, Jeff, if you were to handicap right now the field, who do you think the 2 fastest cars are overall going into Sunday's race?
Well, I think Kyle Larson, he's certainly one of the best cars for sure. Fastest on the speed chart, but if you look at his, the laps put together, I think Kyle Larson looks really good. I think Kyle Busch looks really good, and I think Kevin Harvick. I think that's my top 3.
Kyle Busch needs to be good in the position that he is in now because Kyle Busch has dug himself into a little bit of a hole with the first 2 races of this round.
And I think the biggest concern I have is for the 48. Jimmy Johnson and his team, they just didn't appear to me to have the speed that compared to the guys that he's going to have to beat. It's clear that the 18 is fast, and I just right now don't think that this team has the speed that they're going to have. Now, listen, it's Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson. I wouldn't count them out after one practice, but they're going to have to make some improvements for the second practice and then again going into the race.
How about Ryan Blaney, who comes in 9 points above the cut line but has to start in the back of the field because of the qualifying infraction?
I think Ryan Blaney's speed looks good. It's not as good as those 3 we mentioned earlier, but it's not that far off. Again, I think the key for them is when the cautions come out, have clean pit stops, make up spots when they're easy on restarts to try to get yourself into those point-paying positions before the end of stage 1.
Drivers will go and debrief with the crew chiefs and the teams to find out what final adjustments they can make, because there is a final practice what will they focus on for that last hour?
Drivability. I want my car to feel good. It needs to go fast, but the better it feels, the easier it is to drive. And something else, too, I want to mention Paul Menard was very good in practice. And hometown guy, Clint Boyer, he was 5th fastest, so that'd be huge for him to have a good day.
You mentioned hometown guy, Clint Boyer from Emporia, Kansas. Plenty still to go here on NBCSN as well as NBC. That's where the race will be today. The Xfinity Series race from Kansas. That's on NBC at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank again the NBC Sports Regional Network.